Welcome back, Wolfpack. Brolis here, and today we're going to be talking about Reshiram and Zekrom for VGC 2016, so we're going to have a lot of really in-depth discussions and stuff. I decided to do both of them in the same video because there isn't too much to each of them, but together they make a pretty solid video. Also, there are some interactions like with Fusion Bolt and Fusion Flare that I don't really want to repeat myself on, so we can just kind of make these Pokemon work together or work with other Pokemon, and it's going to make for an interesting video. So I feel that the main thing to address with Reshiram and Zekrom are the weaknesses. As we can see here, we're going to have Ground, Rock. Well, that's really already really bad, and then Dragon, just to make sure we're going to be absolutely destroyed by pretty much everything the VGC metagame has to offer. For the Reshiram, and then Zekrom is going to be the same thing, kind of, but a little worse at the same time. Fairy, so that means Xerneas gets to have its way with us, as well as any other Fairy-type Pokemon. Then we have Dragon, Ice, and Ground. So no Rock, but we have Ice, which is going to be just as common. These Pokemon are going to have a pretty hard time, which is why we're going to be playing the massive speed and damage game. One beneficial thing about Reshiram that makes it really nice to use is that it is the highest special attack of any Fire-type Pokemon that can carry an item. So Groudon is going to be Primal Reversion and Charizard is going to be Charizard Y, so they're going to have their respective items to get those forms, but with Reshiram, there's nothing else in our way, and we can go for some crazy stab fire damage that can either find its way through a Life Orb, or we can go fast and get a Choice Scarf. With Choice Scarf, now we get to outspeed some of those threatening Pokemon, and at least not be as worried as we go and pump out a ton of damage, and if we play a really fast, full speed aggro comp, we might be able to eliminate our threats before they have a chance to hit us, which is pretty nice. Now it can be disrupted by all sorts of support Pokemon, which does bring in some weakness, but we have some really fun things that we can do. So first off, with the Choice Scarf, you will be locked in, but you will be gaining a lot of speed, and hold on to a Modest Nature for a lot of special attack damage. Heat Wave, Blue Flare, Draco Meteor, Earth Power, these are going to be your most basic options for just high amounts of damage. Heat Wave, what it will do is hit both opponents. Blue Flare, what it will do, well, that's just your massive stab nuke that isn't Draco Meteor. Draco Meteor is your massive stab nuke that is Draco Meteor, and then Earth Power, and it's just good for coverage and stuff, but at the same time, this won't find one-hit KOs onto Primal Groudon, or it's going to be pretty specific, because when you use Earth Power on a Steel-type Pokemon, you're better off using Stab, so you can find in some other moves to put here that we will talk about as we go through Reshiram's kit, even though there aren't a super duper amount when you're going for the Choice Scarf, so it'll be kind of up to the coverage preference that you want to cover. Now with this, I was thinking we can pair it with the Groudon. This is going to be some pretty solid synergy right here that you're going to be able to outspeed, get some good damage, and then you just go into a Precipice Blade. So now you get to hit with Heat Wave Precipice Blades, go for a double KO, and you just kind of get really nice coverage from that, but you will be really ground weak at that point. So another Groudon that's either running faster or is supported better could be a bit of a problem. It's just nice synergy right here between the two Pokemon. And we can also look at another kind of Reshiram, which is going to be supportive but high damage. I think one thing that we really cannot undersell about this is how much damage the Blue Flare is going to be doing. That's a stab 130 base power move with the highest special attack fire Pokemon can have with an item. If we are going to be running like Life Orb, which takes its own Tailwind and takes its own support, that's going to be ridiculous amounts of neutral KOs, even against legendary Pokemon, but with this, we're also looking at the Focus Sash for like Tailwind into Draco Meteor, and then your Blue Flare or your Fusion Flare, depending on how you're running it, and then we can just kind of run it however we need to. So we'll talk about this set in a bit, but first let's go and look up the matchups, that way we know what to expect. Now, one problem is about having all this stab fire, is that Dragon-type Pokemon resist you, and a lot of the metagame is Dragon, so it's going to remove some of that, which is what Draco Meteor is for, so they either resist you or they get supered and mega blown up, which is also a very nice thing to consider. As we can see right here, the Earth Power isn't really too much, same with the Draco Meteor against Primal Groudon, and it's going to be able to Precipice Blade you into the ground, so you need to have another Pokemon that's faster than your average Primal Groudon. This is a hit point invested set, so say it was like Adamant with speed invested, we're still going to need to chip in a lot of damage to make sure the Primal Groudon goes down, but it's not too hard to outspeed base 90, so that is something to consider, and it does kind of help because, as you can see, we're getting slightly more damage on our Earth Power than the Blue Flare, but the Blue Flare is already still a very high amount, and it doesn't force an early Draco Meteor while we are Scarfed. Next up, we also have Reshiram into the Xerneas, just kind of showing how much damage we can try to get across. The Heat Wave is again kind of in that same situation. You need to outspeed it, or you need to have a Pokemon that's Taunt, or some way of shutting down the Geomancy. It's going to want to have a Smeargle next to it. It's going to want to have Fake Out or something like that. but at the same time, you can play around, like, you know, you can fake out Xerneas to at least delay its setup while your Reshiram gets delayed or something like that. Now, they might not expect a Heat Wave, so against a Follow Me comp, sometimes you'll see Xerneas next to Follow Me. If you're doing that double hitting with Heat Wave into the Xerneas, you're going to be pretty fine. And as you can see here, a neutral non-boosted Moonblast doesn't KO you, so you can go with this Reshiram and even the Groudon. And if they don't go for crazy amounts of status or amazing amounts of shutdown, you know, you can easily bring this down with the Heat Wave and then a Precipice Blades, or you can go for those double hitting moves to hit through a potential Follow Me, but even then, we do have to worry about the Fake Out. We're still getting good damage. As long as we can play out of that, we can still do kind of okay, but we are going to be at risk from the Moonblast, and let's see how we look if we have a Dazzling Gleam on top of that. So Dazzling Gleam is going to do less damage from the split damage, and if we go into the +2, it actually won't be able to knock us out. So Xerneas will have to make a choice of nuking something with the Moonblast or getting crazy damage across, and you might be able to deal with it. As for other moves against a Ho-Oh, if you have 124 attack EVs and they have no defensive investment but full hit point investment, you will be able to find a one-hit KO against a Ho-Oh. So that's kind of some very technical stuff. If you don't want the Earth Power, you can run the Stone Edge instead. I don't know about it on a Choice Scarf set, but at the same time, I don't know about it on another set because you are running out of moves to use pretty quickly, and giving up the Protect on a Reshiram could be a pretty bad thing, especially under Tailwind. If you're double outspeeding your opponent, say you go for this set, what you want to do is you just Tailwind, eat the hit, Focus Sash keeps you alive, and then you can throw out the Draco Meteor, the Fusion Flare, maybe the Heat Wave if you want to run on this, but the Protect outplay is pretty nice. If you feel they want to finish you off at that one hit point, you Protect, and now your other Pokemon, potentially Groudon, potentially any other Pokemon, is going to be able to throw out a huge move for free under that speed, and that can work out pretty nice if you make the right prediction on that one. So, things to consider. As for the EV spread on this one, it might seem a bit weird throwing hit point invested on a Focus Sash. So, this is where you could technically add those attack EVs for a Stone Edge, but you are giving up that move slot, which kind of doesn't make sense. Like, it's only for one or two specific Pokemon, so it's not the most optimized. But with this, the idea is, say if they're not one-hit KOing you, well then you still want the hit point invested. This is just for super effective hits. If they're not hitting you super, you still have a good chance of surviving something, so it is worth just putting the hit point invested. Unless you want to go full speed. Full speed is pretty nice, but I like the EVs I had right here. I'm trying to remember what the number is now. If it's at the 140, you're going to be able to outspeed Jolly Scarf Chomp or any Jolly, Timid, whatever, like Speed Nature Pokemon with less than 103 base speed. So then you can do that after the Tailwind setup, which means they throw out the Earthquake, they throw out the damage. If they don't double focus you down, you survive on the Focus Sash, you get your Tailwind, and now you're going to be able to be faster than this Pokemon. Naturally, if you want to be faster than a 105 or 110 Scarf Pokemon, not as common, but still something to consider. Then you just throw in more speed invested, and if you're trying to beat out other Tailwind compositions, then that's when you go for the full speed investment. If you don't want to be Tailwind outsped by, I don't know, a timid Kyogre or something, like, it's just for those little matchups like there, and that's kind of your play. Do you want to just have more hit point invested for the non-Focus Sash situations, or do you just want to be an absolute speed freak, in which case that works out pretty well. As for your Blue Flare, like I said, absurd amounts of damage, but this is where we can maybe run a Fusion comp. So Fusion Flare and Fusion Bolt are going to be kind of interesting. But first, let's talk about Zekrom a bit so we can understand why it wants to maybe run with Reshiram. Mostly it just wants Tailwind. If this Pokemon gets a lot of speed, it's going to be going really well on the Zekrom, which is why I'm putting up Crobat, because Crobat is a really busted supportive Pokemon right now through the Tailwind, with the Taunt, with the Quick Guard, and they can cross poison the Xerneas just to be safe, so it's a really, really bomb Pokemon right now, and Zekrom runs really well with it. So the idea behind this is that you just put in a ton of attack, a ton of speed, and if you're not running Tailwind, you probably want to go with the Choice Scarf for some really good matchups. The main thing about Zekrom that makes it really strong is it's a physical hitting legendary. There's not too many of those. I mean, we do have Groudon and stuff, and we do have Mega Mewtwo X, but it's a very reliable, just physical Pokemon that has ridiculous amounts of damage because it has the Bolt Strike. Bolt Strike is going to be 130 base power, and it's also going to be able to just decimate any Kyogre, still get good damage on other Pokemon, and that's what these damage calculations are for. So the idea is that if you have a Life Orb on a Zekrom, you're going to be able to Dragon Claw, one-hit KO a Mega Rayquaza. That's something to consider. That's why we want the Tailwind so bad on it, because, alright, we protect Tailwind, and then we can just outspeed into the Life Orb Dragon Claw and absolutely blow up pretty much any Dragon-type Pokemon. So unless you're going up against a full hit point defensive invested Giratina that has Draco Meteor, you're going to be doing really well against Dragon-type Pokemon, and then we can just kind of add on to there. So as for other moves, you're mostly going to be about Fusion Bolt and Dragon Claw. Like if we look at Stone Edge, I mean, it doesn't really add too much for us because it's a rock-type move with pretty low accuracy in a way, because okay, Fusion Bolt, well, that's stab, that's going to be able to hit flying type Pokemon anyways. It's not really going to add too much for that, and if we're in a position where Fusion Bolt, Dragon Claw aren't already scoring KOs, or if they're not the most optimal move, then we might be in trouble. As for Crunch, unless we're in a position where Gengar, Aegislash start gaining some momentum, which isn't really too incredibly likely. I know Gengar's getting kind of common, but we're not going to see too many Aegislash or like crazy ghost type Pokemon that we really need the Crunch for. Like, that's just the problem, that Bolt Strike is so strong. Like with the stab, it brings its power to over anything a regular super effective move can hit, so it doesn't add too much, and that's why we do want to go for the Draco Meteor potentially against the more physically defensive Pokemon, since we are going to be using this as a huge physical Pokemon. And then there is the problem with Intimidate, which is why physical Pokemon aren't getting too represented as much. It's just kind of crazy, but the matchups still really good in our favor. So I mean, against other Pokemon, if we go against the Primal Kyogre, Bolt Strike is going to be outrageous, insane, super duper amounts of damage. Even if they do bring in an Intimidate, we're going to be able to one-shot a Primal Kyogre. So if that is giving your team problems, you don't have to worry about it too much. And if we're either Scarfed or running it Jolly or going under some kind of like Tailwind or stuff, yeah, this is even Jolly nature. So if we had like Adamant Scarf, or if we were going Tailwind Adamant, even hit point invested, like we're going to be able to make a lot of work come out of this, as long as we have that Life Orb boosting our damage and just absolutely obliterating everything. Same with the Xerneas. If we're running, actually it'd probably be a Naughty nature if we are going to be using that Draco Meteor. So that is the nature to consider on the Draco Meteor. And as we can see here, Moonblast is going to destroy us anyways, but Bolt Strike is solid damage. So if it decides to not go for the Geomancy, double outspeed into that Bolt Strike is going to be pretty solid. And as you can see, the matchups kind of just start falling apart on these Pokemon, because it needs to hit super or else it's still really good amounts of damage, but the weaknesses keep it down. And that's why I decided to put them together, because yeah, you kind of run out of that last move slot in some situations unless you're looking for very specific coverage. And if we talk about, let's say, Reshiram and Zekrom on the same team, they're kind of super affected by the same things, and their coverage doesn't really expand too much. Oh boy, we get Dragon Electric and then Dragon Fire and then maybe one extra move that doesn't really contribute too much else. So if we are going to be running them, like, you know, Reshiram seems like a pretty solid Tailwind into amazing damage kind of Pokemon. If you make that work, well then Zekrom is going to have an opportunity for boosted damage. So it depends on where you want to put your speed. Remember, the slower Pokemon is going to get that extra damage. Power doubles if used after Fusion Bolt compared to power doubles if used after Fusion Flare. I think it just shows that Reshiram is a really good Tailwind, potentially support high damage Pokemon that could be used out pretty well, and we will need to pay attention to the speed EVs, because the slower Pokemon kind of doesn't really matter if you're Tailwind outspeeding your opponent in any situation. You know, just knock off a couple extra EVs if we're going for, like, say, against the Scarf Tromp, if we want to outspeed them. Instead of going for the 140, we can go like 148 or 156, and then put 1 point less on the Pokemon we want benefiting from it. Now, I feel like, in a way, Reshiram should be the slower Pokemon, because Zekrom, it already has the damage covered. You can make it run those offensive moves as well, so Reshiram's the one that wants the extra damage, since it's being the more supportive one. So what we can do with this is we can go Life Orb, potentially that Naughty nature if we are running into the Draco Meteor. But as we can see here, like the Life Orb Dragon Claw into Life Orb is really nice. And then Fusion Bolt, if we're trying to look for a situation where we need that fire to punch through, it can be pretty good. And even then, Fusion Bolt will still knock out a Kyogre if you aren't intimidated. So you can use that as just a better accuracy situation. You don't have to risk this 15% accuracy, so they're going to be going down anyways, and then it opens up like the Dragon Claw and potentially another move, maybe just the Draco Meteor on that Naughty, like I've said before. And these two Pokemon can kind of find some synergy together like that, or you support them in their own separate ways, and that's why I decided to make a video about them together. Because, yeah, I've mentioned a lot of the problems enough at this point, and I'd just be repeating myself. So Zekrom, Reshiram, they have the damage, they lose it in the weaknesses, and their coverage kind of isn't anti-meta enough. Like, if Zekrom could get a hold of that Earthquake, or if Reshiram, I don't know what really Reshiram would have, because, again, they also have way too strong of stabs, that if your Blue Flare doesn't cut it, then you're kind of screwed anyways, and that's a really, really bad thing to do. So if you guys enjoyed this video, that's how you use Reshiram, Zekrom. Good Pokemon. It's not their meta, unfortunately, and that's why it's not going to go too well for them. So if you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope you all have a nice day. Thank you for watching.
Planet Oats so creamy and not watery like.
Exactly, and unsweetened has 0 grams of sugar.